Hello, I'm here today with my friend Feynman Liang. How are you, Feynman?
Hey, good to see you again. Good, long time no see. How's it
Yeah,
going, Kannan?
yes, it's going good. It's going good. We met 4 or 5 years ago at a company called Gigster. You remember that company, of course. And It's Andreessen Horowitz company. Um, I thought it was I love the premise. So let's start with that. I want to get into your background a little bit, but let's just start with that company because it was a very interesting company to me. The premise is that you could, software is building blocks and you can create reusable pieces. And we all know that. And that's kind of been the holy grail for software for, whatever, decades. But they had this other idea, which that you could track, everyone leaves a digital footprint. So even the best coders or the best salespeople, they all have Gmail, they all have a GitHub account, they use Slack, and you could track those inputs, and then you could kind of figure out how to rank people who is a good developer. You could find people that are compatible. Talk a little bit about what attracted you to Gigster and what the thesis that you remember that kind of first got you excited.
Dude, it's really interesting you gravitated towards the supervisor project, Kannan, where the project that you're talking about, where we essentially built automation. I mean, it wasn't called AI at the time. It was just very basic computer logic to look at the digital footprint of developers on freelance teams
Yeah.
and to kind of piece together from their commits, from their test results, from the documentation they wrote, the quality of a software project. That's something I've been doing my entire career, Kannan.
Yeah.
Before I got to Gigster, I was at Data or not Databricks. I was at Bridgewater working
Uh-huh.
on an internal tool called Dots. And now what Dots was all about is it was all about, taking observations, individual dots, and then connecting those into lines over time, also
Yeah.
for employee behavior.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and so
what was the supervisor never really, I think we had this thing that we could rate freelancers pretty well with the karma system, but it never really took off. What were the problems with it to actually being useful in production?
mm, right, yeah. So a lot of the features never made it out of POC stage. And I think that, I mean, and this is a common problem that plagues a lot of enterprise software projects. It's that to go from POC to production, um, you have to remove the guardrails that you put in place for like idealized conditions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And whether that's on like load and typical engineering stuff, but what we're seeing now in terms of intelligent applications, in terms of AI and ML, is guardrails around your data ingest. So oftentimes, like in your POC, you'll have really clean data or a really tidy data set from 2 years ago that was snapshot just for your greenfield use case. And to
Yeah.
really translate that into production was a lot more difficult. And this is what we saw on supervisor was that translating like something that was like an evaluation to something we could really scale to the entire network of 2,000 developers
Yeah.
was a whole beast of itself that
I get you.
we
I
weren't
get it.
equipped to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to go back into some of those use cases you got. So when I met you, it was really funny because I was only coming into the office. I was only at Gigster for a very short time, but I still closed a multi-million-dollar deal because
I remember that.
we had access to a lot of the CTOs through Andreessen's executive briefing, and so it was eventful. But obviously the company kind of went sideways. But when you introduced yourself to me and you said I'm Feynman, we were sitting close to each other, and my eyes lit up. I don't know if you remember this because one of my heroes is Richard Feynman, and I thought to myself, I said, what kind of parents will name their kid Feynman? They must have a lot of confidence in that kid, and they had a lot of confidence in you, and sure enough, it paid off because tell a little bit about your educational background, what you studied, and in particular your thesis at Berkeley because it was very interesting to me.
Yeah. So let's see. Did my undergrad at Amherst College and Dartmouth College, and then did my master's degree at Cambridge under a fellowship to study what at the time was just machine learning, speech and language technology before ChatGPT. So a very long time ago,
Absolutely, yeah.
at least in machine learning timeline. Um, And then after that, moved to the Bay Area to attend Berkeley, where kind of I believe you also were. So
I did,
we
yes,
got we got that connection.
absolutely. I have a computer science degree from Berkeley, although I kind of, the world's changing, but I'm kind of more on the technology of business as opposed to I'm in the business of technology rather than the technology of business.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's around the time where I met you. Is my first couple years in the Bay Area, working or doing my PhD at Berkeley. I was working on the side at Gigster. Eventually worked up to a director of engineering position there, but
Yeah,
that was when we got to know each other during our brief intersection there.
that's right.
Um, After we parted ways, I just have been working on my PhD up until 2023.
Yeah.
Um,
And if I remember
and
correctly, the thesis was around computer generated music, right?
Oh no, that was my master's thesis. My master's
Oh,
thesis was around computer generated music, very similar to computer generated text nowadays.
interesting.
Um, my PhD thesis is around heavy tailed modeling, so like modeling black swan or rare events. So things that don't occur very often, but when they occur, they are of serious magnitude.
Absolutely. Fantastic and very interesting. So let's kind of fast forward up to Blue Team and what you're doing now. We at GDS, we kind of have a couple things that, we believe this is the decade of data. And, we don't even say data is the oil. We say data is the gold, going forward. And we had talked a couple times, and I was very interested in kind of some of the things, some of the main problems that people are facing, enterprises, when they deploy these models have to do with data security, data privacy, data leakage. Take us back. When did you see an opportunity there, and kind of how did the idea of BlueTeam.AI come about? And tell us, what are the primary use cases you're going after right now?
Right on. I've been looking at language models for a long time, but it wasn't until recently that I really thought they were commercially viable. Like in 2016 with BachBot, like
Yeah,
barely worked.
yeah,
Um, I think the turning point was really when like, most of us in Silicon Valley played around with ChatGPT in December of
yes,
2022, and we were like, oh, gee, like
yeah,
this is different. This actually might take hold, and we're seeing it take hold. We're seeing it take hold, and a lot of enterprises are currently in pilot and POC phase, but we're seeing co-pilots left and right and generative AI in every single SaaS you can imagine. So that really inspired me watching this kind of growth of this particular category of software, and it really reminded me of like iPhones back in the day, or of like early cloud applications back in the day. It felt like a real like tectonic shift in the types of applications that we were being built, and also the types of security concerns. Just like how bring your own device wasn't managed or completely defeated the enterprise
yeah,
perimeter. I
yeah.
think Gen AI completely defeats our previous controls around firewalls.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so that sets up for, there's risk when people use there. So you're right. When we first started seeing these models in action, just the amazing context that they had that changed the game. It changed everything. So now we get into kind of the dark side. I think you do make a comparison to firewalls when you're talking about data, and there's data privacy, and clearly there's laws like GDPR and that you have to follow, that you have to control, and then there's data security for things like trade secrets and PII. Talk about what are those risks, and how should an enterprise look at it as they start to use these LLMs?
Yeah, absolutely. Regulation in this area is still emerging. We recently saw a revision of the EU AI Act recently get finalized and agreed upon. Um, it highly depends on which first identifying which legislation is applicable to you. So which jurisdictions, govern where you do business and where you intend to deploy the service.
Yeah,
Um, there's some very common ones that we work with. We've seen the EU AI Act and the CCPA, so California's version of GDPR, be
yes,
two very common like regulatory frameworks
yeah.
that our customers have come under, because these are two areas where a lot of people like to do business and want to use AI.
Yeah, yeah. So, we go out, we're talking with kind of CIO level enterprise. And it's always, when you start introducing kind of what they can do, we don't even use the term AI that much. We kind of talk
Mhm.
about the use cases that they have to do. Is it a recommendation engine? Is it a churn analysis? Is it some kind of predictive forecasting for their business? And then there's different sets of models. What is, if you're speaking to a CIO, what's kind of the message you want to give them as they just try and deploy these models? And in general, what's the core thesis of Blue Team AI in terms of how they're needed in the enterprise?
I mean, look, I don't think we figured out exactly what the form factor is for like AI in the enterprise. I think we've figured out some of the like core ingredients. I agree with you. Like data is basically the new oil.
Yeah.
The architecture for these models changes every 3 to 6 months, but that data asset is still reusable and it is reused in training the next generation of models. Um, so when you talk to like, these CIOs or these chief digital transformation directors, people really responsible for the adoption of this next generation AI technology and ML and like, ML based systems. Um, it's important to keep in mind that like this is not like we've seen this before with cell phones, right? Like when cell phones came along, we had don't bring any cell phones onto the enterprise. Here's the corporate BlackBerry. Bring your own device, install our spyware. We saw the same happen with email, right? This generational shift in how we communicate. Okay, now we have spam filters and corporate email scanning.
Yeah.
It's going to be no different with AI. We're going to see all these new tools. We don't know what the form factor is going to look like, but regardless of what the form factor is, you're going to need the same types of enterprise controls and enterprise surveillance and enterprise compliance for it.
Gotcha. And so, is the idea that there's going to be a layer? Talk to me about, like, we work with companies that are very financially oriented, so they're very there's a lot of security and a lot of, you're going to have a layer that's kind of watching out for people using these models to protect the company's data. Is that the architecture that you see?
Yes, that's correct. We're going to have a layer, and the layer will do two things. It'll obviously give you protection. So whether you want to prevent exfiltration, whether you want to protect proprietary information from leaking, or whether for regulatory reasons you need to prevent PII, PHI from going out, this layer will catch that and intervene in band. But moreover, it'll also provide or emit analytics. So you can really understand, how is my workforce using AI? What's the percentage adoption across my
That's
workplace?
a really good point, Feynman. Yeah, yeah, you can actually use that to influence behaviors. A tremendously exciting part of the whole enterprise problem. When you have an enterprise rollout, there's different levels that have to go. Everyone wants to focus on the pony and kind of all these great models, but we have to get through these kind of security and privacy. And I remember reading about this. You probably know better than me, this notorious kind of data leakage. I think it was even at Microsoft, where they were training probably GitHub Copilot, but there was a big data leakage. Talk to me a little bit about that, about what have been some of the reactions to some of these huge announcements of data leakage.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, you can probably, I don't know if they fixed it or not. You can try it out yourself. Just, enter half of a email address that should be private and see if it completes it or not. Or enter the prefix to an AWS key and try to get a completion out of it. No, these data leakage is a huge problem. I mean, obviously researchers are doing their best, but like, look, like you got someone who like spent 7 years doing their PhD in machine learning, like cleaning training data to like sanitize credit card numbers versus like I don't know, like optimizing their CUDA kernel so that it fits into the like GPU architecture of their choice. Like they would obviously prefer task number two. So like you don't have the like we need to demand better like data quality and data cleanliness. Like I'm not making excuses, but
Yeah,
like the reality is like there's fun work and there's boring work. And like I think our researchers, admittedly so, because it's their job, are more focused on research than they are on like data sanity, data cleanliness, data leakage.
100%, 100%. Sometimes it's the boring tasks that are the most valuable. Uh, Excellent. Hey, Feynman, one of the things that we're very passionate about at GDS is open source, and we believe that for innovation, for driving innovation, as well as for vendor neutrality, it's an important thing. And Mark Zuckerberg just today announced that he's going to open source all his stuff when it comes. Talk to me a little bit about how you view open source, both at the model level and at the data stack level. How do you see it being powerful in our industry, and what should people be looking at from a practitioner point of view when they think about open source versus closed models?
Oh, yeah, man, kind of real interesting question. I mean, I think from the software side, look, I've benefited so much from open source. Like if it wasn't for like OpenSearch, OpenTelemetry, Linux, like countless numbers of Apache and MIT licensed projects, like, I wouldn't be able to build like most of the work that I've done in my career. So um, I'm like, immeasurably grateful for it. And I think that you should prefer it unless you have a very good reason, unless a vendor gives you something that you absolutely can't live with. But understand that you're paying for the lock-in. And if the vendor raises their premium, you're stuck there.
Yeah.
This is especially true when it comes to AI models. With these AI models, LLMs in particular, they're not as interchangeable as, say, a database provider because the interface is not standardized. Asking Anthropic to do something will produce different results than asking OpenAI to do it. So you really don't have an equivalent good to exchange between here. I
Yeah,
think that, yeah, go ahead.
no, I love it. We agree 100%. Unfortunately, what usually happens is that closed models have the lead, but there are some big players that have been amazing for Meta being at the front of them that have been very good at moving this forward. So you're so right. I think that open source is kind of there's a lot of what people call vendor lock-in. People are trying to lock in their proprietary advantage, and it may be good for their business model, but it's not good for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, one hot take here on why Meta is doing what they're doing is that, like, the model, like the weights that they are open sourcing, that's not really like valuable in the long term. That's valuable now and like maybe for 3 to 6 months, but like architectures will get better, GPUs will get bigger. We're not going to use the same LLM within a year. We will use the same data though. So going back to GDS's focus on data systems and data integrations and data pipelines, like Meta isn't open sourcing their data because they understand the value is not in these model weights they trained, but it's in the data they can use to train future iterations of even more powerful models.
That's awesome, Feynman. I really agree with what you're saying. It's a really great observation that you just made. One of the things I want to talk about too is that right now, as you said, we're all kind of enamored with ChatGPT when it happened, and right now there's a lot of people kind of probably using it at their work that whether it's not even sanctioned or not. Talk a little bit about that, about people using ChatGPT. And I will tell you, there's a story that I know. I know of at least one personally where someone actually got fired. They were using ChatGPT, and they weren't doing it in an evil way. They were just trying to help the company get forward. But it turned out that they decided that they were exposing proprietary data to the model, and that was a fireable offense. So talk a little bit about how do people even find out if people are using these models inside the firewall of a workplace?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a real big problem for a lot of companies today, right? Like, you don't even know if your employees are using these public and open source SaaS or free SaaS tools like ChatGPT. Um, and even if you do know, you face this conundrum of, well, do I let them use it and risk data leakage? Or do I outright block it and hinder myself and kneecap myself compared to my competitors who are using it?
Yeah.
So and this is the problem that we built BlueTeam.AI to solve is CISOs today really have, this like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place on banning or blocking it, sticking their hand in this or sticking their head in the sand and permitting it with no controls in place.
You're so
And so,
yeah,
yeah,
very
exactly.
very very interesting problem, and it's going to be great. You're going to be part of a kind of a must-have checklist for CIOs that don't want to get fired. So we like that. Hey, this has been great, Feynman. It's awesome to see you kind of your entrepreneurship flourish, and like you and I talk, let's make sure that we stay in close contact and keep our companies working together.
Absolutely, man. I look forward to working
All
together
right.
in the future, kind of.
All right. Let's stay in touch. Thanks, Feynman.